Hello, good evening and welcome. I'm Karima Brown and you're watching Political Exchange, where we unpack Africa's political economy. Yesterday, Planning Minister Trevor Manuel handed over South Africa's blueprint for development to President Jacob Zuma in Parliament. The handover is the culmination of a process which started in 2010 when President Zuma appointed a National Planning Commission to take a critical, cross-cutting and long-term view of South Africa and to advise him, the Cabinet and the country on a long-term vision and plan to take the country forward. Planning Minister Trevor Manuel now joins us from our Cape Town studios to unpack the revised plan. Thank you, Minister, for your time. Minister, the plan sets jobs, education and a capable and development state as the highest priorities. Let's start with jobs. The plan envisages that by 2030 an additional 11 million jobs would have been created, bringing unemployment down to about 6%. How are we going to get that done?
I think it's important to draw a distinction between the word envisages and targets. We are saying as the Planning Commission that we should strive to get full employment, and full employment we think would be at around an unemployment level of 6%. So it's a long shot. It's about effectively doubling the number of people in employ between now and then. So there are a number of issues that we need to look at. Some of them are borrowed from other government departments. The Department of Trade and Industry leads a process called the Industrial Policy Action Plan, the IPAP, and that is accepted, and clearly as part of that industrial policy there would have to be a reinvestment in manufacturing as well as some other industries such as an expansion of the services sector. The second part of this would be the agricultural sector, and we have detailed, in fact agriculture is a bit more detailed than many of the other sectors, how 1 million jobs can be created in a very short space of time in agriculture. The third area would be an investment that South Africa hasn't made in the support systems for small, medium and micro enterprises. Most developing countries have this as a very important plank of economic policy. It's underserved in South Africa at the moment. And the last part of it would be the recognition that there would have to be some public employment programs such as the expanded public works program, community works programs, as a means towards sustainable livelihood. They are not permanent jobs, but they are very important within a chain of lifting people from poverty. The key challenge, I think, would be how we can get more jobs going early, and of those early jobs that are established early, they're likely to be very significant multipliers. The other part of the program is taking a look at the both higher education, further education and training system. In respect of the FET system, the plan speaks of very significant investment in quality as well as an expansion in quantity. The throughputs from our FET system are much too low, and so we're not producing the requisite skills. Young people are finding themselves unemployable, and that adds to political risk. So, you know, it's the education employment nub that is fundamentally important to a series of other issues.
Now, Minister, of course, youth unemployment is the issue that is occupying everyone's mind. The plan does talk to a series of initiatives to kind of get young people into the economy. Just take us through the details in the plan around getting young people, you know, active in the economy.
Look, one of the first observations, Karima, is that the quality of people leaving our schooling system is very poor. We made the observation as long ago as June 2011 when we released the diagnostic. And you know, it's a matter confirmed by the release of the annual national assessment results for grades 3, 6 and 9, uniform national results that are actually quite scary. So we're saying that, you know, if one looks at the results, and let me cite the example of grade 6 maths, 70% of those who wrote got less than 35% for the exam. It's a very, very scary number. The English literacy exam has about the same result, 69%. This is very, very scary. So 7 out of every 10 kids can't get past the first post. It's less than 35%. You fail there, your ability to problem solve later in life is going to be very severely curtailed. We have to deal with these issues early enough. So the observation would be that we're not preparing people for absorption in the labor market. If that happens to 13, 14-year-olds in grade 6, I think the reason why we have dropout rates in this country at high school, it speaks for itself. So we've got to fix the schooling system in its entirety, and then we also need to change the FET system. Those are preeminent so that we have a cadre of young people who are more easily going to find employment. The second strand is that we need to work with business organizations, and over the past while we've consulted a range of business organizations on this issue to expand their training commitments, and the idea of something that would make it a bit more attractive. A tax incentive for training purposes, a tax incentive for apprenticeship purposes. We first raised the idea of, not on the employer's side, but on the side of young people, the idea of a transport subsidy, because if you're trapped in a poor community, you can't even raise taxi fare to go and look for a job. You have no idea. The asymmetries of information are much too strong. So we need to deal with those issues as well. This means that community organizations and community facilities will have to be retooled because they have to be involved in the distribution of some of these things.
Minister, one of the issues that you said when you made your address yesterday was the fact that we need to do things differently, that we will require leadership, a readiness to make difficult decisions and to implement effectively. Do you think, if one looks at the various social partners, that we have the required leadership to take this kind of bold action?
Karima, let me personalize this thing. I think I've known you as an activist from your early teenage years. And that was what shaped South Africa. People became active in their communities. That was fundamentally important. Leadership is not something you start with. Leadership is something that develops in the course of doing things. We need people to do things, and there are some things that we must invite people to do. And top of the list there would be for communities to take ownership of schools and for schools to be far more accountable to communities for what they do. And I'm not talking of you know, going out and inviting people to burn tires and you know, just destroy public property. I'm talking of a different kind of community ownership. What has happened in South Africa is that the same energy and drive that delivered democracy through that very participative phase, the 80s and the early 90s, the moment we secured the elections, it's as though people disengaged. Mm-hmm. Part of what we need to do is to get people re-engaged, which is why active citizenship is such an important part. We've described it as one of the critical success factors. We must get people active in the issues that affect their lives, and that is how leadership will develop. I think we will also be able to get a capable and developmental state out of that process, because you know, you can't, it's impossible to be negligent when you're serving a community that actually cares about itself. When people talk to you, when people are listening, when people are setting tasks, you as a public representative actually have to be much better at what you do. That is how we will give quality to democracy. It's the way in which the doing things differently would be accounted for in the plan.
Minister, one of the key sectors that needs to come on board, of course, is the education sector in terms of unions. Now, the plan is quite critical of the kind of political interference, particularly at the basic level, at the school level. The plan talks about giving principals, you know, the right to make decisions at school level and getting political interference out of the equation. Do you think that this this is something that you can sell to a highly unionized teaching sector with unions like SATU, for example?
You know, it's actually very easy. We need education departments in provinces who share the same commitment. It's very interesting in the Western Cape now, and it's a process that started before the present government. So it's something that started in about 2007. It took a few years to set up. It's now running pretty well. Every principal has to be trained as a manager. Now, the unions might resist this, but all of their members are participating in the program, because if people are not going to be trained to manage the schools, they have to make way for others. Now, it's a very important issue, because what has happened is that the most competent teachers, people who have skills at the chalkboard, are then drawn into management, and so you don't replace those skills in the classroom. These are issues that need attention. If it can work in the Western Cape, then I think part of what we need to do is to ensure that we can get it working in other departments as well. Now, what teachers tell us is that it's not only that unions insist on who gets appointed as principal, but it's also that unions have insisted on who gets appointed as district officials. And so you've got a kind of anti-establishment operating from schools through district offices and sometimes even into provincial offices. This is going to have to be repaired. And in saying so, I'm not taking an anti-union stance, but you know, we need to ensure that nobody is allowed to gamble with the education of the next generation. Mm-hmm. And it's very important to make the point quite bluntly as well, that in education, it's very clear that there's a bifurcation between people who can afford to pay high fees at either private or semi-private schools, which is what the former Model C schools have now become, and parents who have no choice. Mm-hmm. And Minister, the parents who have no choice actually leave their children without any hope because of what happens in education. It has to be fundamentally wrong, and we must set about to correct that.
Minister, one of the issues that a lot of people are saying is that we've always put all the emphasis on access to education or to health, but we've neglected the quality of those services. In education, in the opening statements, you were very clear about the fact that the quality of education is certainly not up to scratch. How does the plan talk about ramping up the quality of education so that we produce kids that are ready to actually take their place in a constantly changing global environment?
I think that there are various parts to it. We had an earlier proposal in the November release that spoke of remunerating teachers based on the output and quality of education. We've withdrawn that because every bit of advice we've taken has counseled against that. But you know, I think that one of the issues we have to win is that teacher skills must be continually upgraded. Somebody who passed through a teacher's training college in the 70s, who's still teaching, who hasn't had any outside intervention, outside support, doesn't know how to turn on a computer, is probably a bit of a lost cause. Teachers have to have their skills upgraded, and that is part of the quality upgrade. The way in which we've looked at the education system is to concentrate on three very important interfaces. The first of these is the accountability of a school to the community it serves. And that requires school governing bodies plus. Now, school governing bodies work wonderfully in leafy suburbs, and they don't work where the trees don't grow. And so that needs to be repaired. It's about empowering parents to understand what their rights and responsibilities are. That interface of accountability is very important. If that works, then your school principals as managers can oversee what happens in the school and feel accountable not just to an education department but also to the community. And the third issue is managing the interface between the teacher and the class. Now, let me be very provocative, Karima, and cite an example. In the case of textbooks in POLOKWANE, now on the one hand, we know that the Department of Education was put under administration in December. And by then, the budget had already been spent and pre-committed, books hadn't been ordered. That's part of the crisis. But how come parents didn't notice that children weren't being taught, that children didn't get books, that parents didn't feel equipped to raise this matter, didn't take it to their pastors or priests or community organizations, that teachers didn't raise this matter? How come nobody noticed that there was a problem until it was actually exceedingly late in the day? I think what we are saying, that education is an all-in effort. If children are not doing homework, surely parents must say, isn't there something wrong? Should I call your teacher? What is happening here? It's transforming what our responsibilities are, and I use the term insourcing responsibility because there's a sense that come the elections in 1994, many people sat back and said, now we can outsource our work to those who we've elected to sit in Parliament. There's something wrong in the equation there.
Absolutely. Minister, we're going to take a short break now, but when we return, we continue our conversation on South Africa's plan for the future.